Hello, welcome to this level 3 video in my energetic system series. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks, and this video is going to be an introduction to the layers of exchange and the lenses of awareness, I guess is what I'm going to call them. The wording is, it is what it is, because these things are different and new, and I feel they require different and new words, I guess, to help us to explain them. So bear with me here as I work through these kind of concepts and topics that are different and require different words so that we can see the nuances, the differentiation, right? And not be overly wrapped up in the preconception or the assumptions that we've been fed about certain phrases or words. I did a bit of clearing ground around the processes versus polarity in the last video that I did. If you haven't seen that, I will link it below so you could check that out, because there is sometimes confusion about what exactly polarity means, or a charge collection. A service orientation is sometimes also what it could be called or seen as. Basically, polarity is an overall presentation, a feel, the atmosphere of the overall workings of the system as a whole. And then we have the processes, of course, which the processes are the individual transactions, everything that makes up and is a part of the data set to create the polarity is the processes. So that, along with understanding the difference between negative service to the self and a negatively oriented system which serves the self as another, or as the great other, as in a positive service to others. But it is angled in a perspective of self-service, because you're doing self-care. You're providing positive service to the self. And that in itself can be a kind of confusion point for people. So I spent some time clearing up a little bit about that as well in the last video. So if you find yourself in a place like that where you're having a problem understanding exactly what the differences are between what I'm talking about, know that there are other videos and references that I have talked more in depthly about these things. So I will link them below, as many as I can find that are sort of relevant. Yeah, either or. For this video here, what I really want to go over before we dive into all of the different layers and lenses is to just talk about what I'm saying when I talk about layers and lenses. Now, the first thing to understand and realize, and I've talked a kind of roundabout way about this throughout the series and lots of my other videos. You as yourself and me as myself, who I am witnessing and exploring and living my life, right? I have a lens of conscious awareness. I see the world through my own eyes, right? Just like you see the world through your eyes. And there is this sacred boundary that sort of seals you, makes you you, makes me me. Who's to say how or why or whatever? Those are conversations for other times. But just to understand that there is this truth here that says and shows us consistently that we are our own self here. And that in itself becomes a system in this series in the language that I'm choosing to use and to talk about. When we talk about ourselves in this first person view, who we are the totality of a system. And by extension, or running parallel, you could not just call it a system, you could call it an entire universe if you'd like, a multiverse, an entity, a complex, whatever kind of words will, jive with you to understand that sacred boundary that defines a thing. Having the capability to even do that, right? That is creator consciousness. That's what we are. That's what having perspective and observation is, right? We define purpose and meaning, and we create that as we are looking at things, as we are giving our attention to something. And that is really the looking and giving attention to is what I'm kind of talking about when I say lenses. Just like you can look through a lens and see when you take a picture, right? You look through the lens and you see, you can zoom out at your world around you. There's other kinds of lenses, right? There's lenses within a telescope that allow you to see very far away. There's lenses on the opposite side of the spectrum, like a microscope, which allow you to dive deep within and see the layers within, versus seeing the external larger layers outside, right? And those are the layers of awareness, the layers of reality, these different worlds that consciousness creates when you're looking at something. That's what I'm really talking about when I'm talking about lenses and layers. We all have the potentialities to grasp this kind of stuff. But it really depends on where you are in your ascension and where you are in your seeking as to whether you're ready to do that or not. And these videos are for people who are ready to do that, who understand the task at hand and who are willing and able and to raise their hand and to say they're ready. Nobody can make that choice for you but yourself. Nobody could tell you you get something, right? No matter how many ways or avenues a teacher could explain a thing, the same process, say like a math way to do a math procedure or something. There's visual learners, there's auditory learners, right? There's learners who have to do it and walk through it. Though there's those types of approaches to information transactions are unique to each one of us. And it's only when the bell rings for you, where that little light lights up, those dots connect finally, and you see the horse it made, and then you see it's a horse. That's the only thing that really matters, right? And so when I'm saying all of that to just let people know that things that I talk about might not be for you, and they might be for you. There's a wide variety of conscious awareness out there. And I am hoping to reach as many different kinds as possible. And with that, sometimes comes the difficulty of trying to explain difficult topics, right? So we each have our own gift of life here, right? Which comes with this first person point of view. We, as complex as humans, we are made up of three, or we can choose to look at it, right, in three different angles. Now this is the other thing that I have talked about many times already in the systems series, but just to reiterate, the concept of a system in the workings is that of organization of processes, right? And there's a basic function, a flow that happens with creator consciousness. And basically, it starts with one in a whole, and that one whole is and can be an operator all of its own, in an entity. It has its own charge and polarity. It is its mind, body, spirit complex. Just like we said, you are you, and there's a sacred boundary around you, right? When we recognize something as a unique piece of a whole, and we designate it to its own little pillar of uniqueness, that in itself is a choice of observation. That is done for a purpose. Because we could easily flip our concept and see humanity as the whole. And then me or you as the individual, we are not the whole. We're just a piece. We're just one human of 8 billion, however many. And that's, looking at humanity as a whole is just as valid as of a working, and has many, many discovery points in its own, and lessons and things that you could do with observations, of seeing humanity as a whole and seeing that system and understanding how that system works. Now, that's because we have chosen that as the whole to look at, right? Now, instead, we're choosing to look at the whole as ourself. Especially here in level 3, where we're getting into the systems within, it's so important to understand this shift in perspective and the choice of creator consciousness to dissect apart humanity, to segregate myself or yourself as the singular whole, and then to look at that system as a whole. Your system as a whole will follow rules, same rules that my system as a whole follows, and the same rules that humanity as a whole could follow, the same rules the universe follows, right? Because we are all the same, created the same things, and we're all doing energy transactions. And the rules of the energy transactions, they go across all boards, all spectrums. So we can use all of the wonderful understandings that we got from dissecting the Torus as a tool, and use those laws and those truths, those patterns and processes, to look at our own Torus as a whole. And that our own Torus as a whole and our polarity and collections, I am going to start weaving into level 4 as we start to talk about as how we function in a direct world. But for now, what I want to do is even further talk about the system as a whole internally. Because when we look at systems, any system, and we make the determination that that's what we're going to do, we have 2 choices first. You can look at the system as a whole and how it operates and what it's doing. Or you can look at what makes up the system. Each piece, each moving mechanism within that system, and what it's doing and how it works. The internal bits of it. So we have the external and we have the internal versions of the system, right? And then, of course, we have the communication transactions that are a result of both of those, and that happen because of the workings, the truths, and the directions and instructions that each one of those separate external and internal layers work. And this is why it's simple and also complex at the same time, because everything follows, and everything can be dissected into 3 portions. Everything follows the same themes within those 3 portions. However, once you dive into one portion on its own, it becomes a whole again. And therein lies the catch-22, because when you choose to look at consciousness in a layer and lens as a whole, you're back to square one again. And you have to remember then again that that whole in itself is again made up of three: external, internal, and the communication of the two. And as many times as you choose to look again and dissect and pull apart, there will always be more underneath it to find. That you will always find external, internal workings between. And that's why I really started with the Torus tool, and I wanted everybody to understand how it is a tool, what the functions of each of those three, what their rules and regulations are, and what their possibilities are, and how each one of them works within positive and negative balancing of energies, give and take of energies. And also, there's a layer of duality, of morality and polarity that is included in that as well, that each will reflect as a whole. So this one was saying about being simple yet complex. So back to ourselves and ourself as the whole system, right? Ourselves as a whole system, we have capability of three lenses of which we could operate and see our life through. We have our internal lens and your internal world, and that is whatever goes on inside of you. Any thoughts, emotions, energies, anything that you would have to explain to another in order for them to know that's going on within you, that is what's the internal world. And the internal world is like the seed at the center. It is like the 0 point, where all the magic happens, where everything is birthed out of, where everything passes through, regenerates, and passes through the midpoint of the center of the torrido, of your system as a whole. The metaphorical center is your inner life, your inner core, right? And we talked about that as being that hourglass shape. Within the torrido. Now, the next world and the next lens that we can see our life through is our direct world. And this is your first person view. This is everything and anything that you ever interact with directly in your life. Anything that comes into your vicinity, anywhere you've ever been, literally, and put your feet on the ground, any person that you've ever interacted with directly, that all is included in your direct world. And that has to do with your external torrido, the masculine flow, your outward service, whether it's service to self or service to others. The third layer and lens that we can look at is the third person view. It is the out-of-body experience. It's being able to connect through imagination space and intuition into things like remote viewing, the Akashic records, collective consciousness, all of these really provable, really identifiable, 3D concepts that are reflected in the external world. The external world is a reflection. It actually isn't real, and you'll never interact with it directly. You cannot interact with it directly. As soon as you've interacted with it directly, it becomes your direct world, right? There's interactions and there's mobility through these lenses to seek and to see. But it's important to understand the scope of availability to you and how you can see the world in these three different ways, and how you can experience reality in these three different ways. And how each of these really is kind of a reality bubble of existence, of, that exists out there, sort of separate from you, but also that you interact with. Again, simple yet complex, right? So as the whole, as your system, you have capability of these three lenses. We'll get into all of them as we go along with the systems, but for now, for level 3, what we're talking about is the inner world, right? And when we look at the inner systems, we have it split into 3. Now, the, I'll show you just my little bit of my notes here about, oh, maybe the light might be too bright behind me here, but there's a mirroring happening here with us seeing out into reality and then what we can see within ourselves. And the mirroring is the same three that we've been talking about, and I talked about with the triad of creation, I talked about with the Torus tool. It's all about the external, internal, and the creation, the product of conception that happens when they work together. So when we choose to look at ourselves as the whole system, and we want to dissect this into three, I talked about this quickly in the lecture video, sort of with the syllabus, where I went through everything we're going to go through. So if you want more right now on this, you can go back and watch that if you haven't seen it yet. But this video here, I want to try to keep around 20 minutes, and I'm at 21. So I briefly want to just introduce these three layers that we're going to dive into. I'm going to make individual videos next for each one. But I thought here I would just kind of clear the verbiage and give people a more defined explanation when I'm talking about layers and lenses, because I feel like there could be some confusion in those terms. So the layers, when we look at ourselves as the system, we have mind, body, and spirit. And this is well known, you know, cross-culturally, across traditions and time. It's been pointed out and talked about in so many ways. My own personal favorite reference is The Law of One. I talk about those books a lot. Got a lot of understandings from them. I still do. But they call it a mind-body-spirit complex. And I really love that because it showcases the layers, the multidimensionality, and the transactions, the communication, and the communion that takes place between all three, that they come together to make up the complex that is you. And all three of these layers are just as important as the next. You know, neither has a higher seat at the table. They all come together in this beautiful triad to create you. Some people might be, you know, used to the reference of the Holy Trinity, and I made an infographic about other ways that we can interpret the Holy Trinity, and I'll share that again on Telegram over on my YouTube community tab, just for people who maybe missed that last time I shared it. But that has to do with external models of this triad of creation, versus here internally, where we're going to talk about them inside of you. And so we have mind, body, and spirit that come together, right? And just to switch over here, my other notes, and I'll share the infographics again too that I had in the syllabus kind of lecture video, because that has a breakdown really clear. But each of these can have a boss. It has its own lens that it sees reality through, that you can zoom down and become, as creator consciousness, become that boss or have a conversation with that boss. It depends on which way it shows itself to you, how you're comfortable with interacting with yourself. It could change over time. It does. For me, it has. It might not for you, but who's to say, right? But feel free to either allow the merging to happen to where creator consciousness inside yourself feels like it is taking possession of that consciousness layer and becoming the boss, or whether you feel like you as creator consciousness is sitting down and having direct communication with the boss as kind of a separate entity. Neither's right or wrong. Whatever feels good to you is perfect. But just to know that the mind has a boss, the spirit has a boss, and your body's physicality has a boss of intelligence. They have their own unique lens that they see reality through, that is their reality bubble, that when you zoom into it, it becomes the system as a whole. And you can then see how the system functions as a whole and gain a lot more insight into it when you have conversations with that boss. Because as you have conversation with the boss and you get comfortable with that, the boss will tell you who's its managers underneath it. Because all bosses delegate consciousness and processes. In organically functioning systems, there is no hierarchy of directionality of communication. Communication flows in all directions, effortlessly, like a communion, all respected, instantaneous sending of impulses, and they're just received. It's just sending and receiving. There isn't judgment, there isn't distortions that happen in lower layers, because it's only as you build conscious awareness and you make greater systems and larger beings into a whole like yourself that you have that full spectrum of creator consciousness at your disposal. And then you have the capability of morality, ethics, and casting judgment with your light and shadow. But that has a lot to do with the heart center. It has a lot to do with the things that I was talking about how the system functions as a whole in an external world, polarity and charge collection. And we'll get into that later. And we'll also see that as we get into the system. So as we get into the boss of the mind, you'll be able to first see the surface level. And the first surface level presentation of the whole system will show you the polarity, the charge collection, because that's the presentation available at that level. And that in itself creates the working. It will show you the managers underneath it. And then when you get into contact with the managers underneath the boss, that's when a line of communication and understanding becomes open. And you sink again down into a deeper layer, and you have clarity of this lens with the managers, and you can see where the problems are within the procedures, within whatever is happening that they are managing, because they will link you into the workers. And then when you can see the processes with the workers, you'll really be able to see if there's something going wrong and why, and have a conversation with the worker and find out what, why, and how it's not working and flowing for them. And you can correct and change that. And then you'll feel the smoothness, the ease, the mobility that's created with those conversations. As you pull your consciousness back up out of the layer and you get back to the managers, the manager will report back, oh, wow, productivity's up. Wow, oh my gosh, look, this, and this has changed. And it's like, yeah, because I went down and I spoke to the worker, and I saw that that worker was exhausted and I gave him some time off or whatever, you know. Or I saw that that worker, you know, felt really underappreciated and neglected, and I went and told them how wonderful they're doing at their job, and they are appreciated, and now they're empowered and they're doing great work. And the manager will be like, wow, you know. And then you get out and zoom up to the boss level again, and the boss will then again, sort of the ripple effects are felt of the changes of that, and the boss will relay again gratitude and admiration for you doing that work for the system. Thank you for easing that. I can feel the changes. I see the positivity here. I can feel the change and the shift of the polarity. And then it creates a better flowing momentum and more available positive choices in that, or, you know, in the future. So this is the working at hand here. This is where we're going. And this is the kind of work that we're going to be setting ourselves up for as we get into each one of these layers, the mind, the body, and the spirit. Now, I've already almost done a half an hour. And quickly, I just want to give, in case anybody did miss my long lecture video, I wanted to just briefly go over a couple more terms of what each of these layers really involve. So we have the mind, and the mind has to do with the logical processes. We would think of this as like the prefrontal cortex, you know, all of the more central nervous system sort of processes that are more frenetic and tangible, the information processing part of the mind. It has to do with your thought energy exchanges and how you take in and process information. And that's electrical, you know, firing, sensory input, not emotions. You know, it's not frequencies. It's electrical based, and it is signals that are received and sent. And that has to do with the logical mind. Easily, it seems blurry and almost contradictory to talk about the spiritual body, and to say that that is about the imagination and your spiritual energy exchanges that have to do with emotions, frequencies. And this ties into things like your innovation, how you think outside of the box, how you come up with creative ideas, how you use your intuition, in these spiritual energy, sensory input and output data sets to make choices and to feel within your gut, you know, which thing to choose, or how to change it up or switch it up, or how to just jump and see things in a whole different way quickly. That has to do with the spiritual body and the imagination. And we have the body's boss, and that has to do with your physical body vessel. It has to do with your physical energy exchanges, your time, how you could literally pick up and move something. You can literally, you know, give your time to somebody or give your time energy to do some sort of job. And your body's infinite intelligence has to do with the subconscious mind. Maybe people sometimes call it the reptilian brain, or the unconscious, the autonomic systems, the things that have to do with all of those kind of hind brain things that just get taken care of. We sort of think they just happen on their own, but that is a form of infinite intelligence within you, and the boss of the body runs all of that, actually. And like I said, when we get into these things and you have conversations with them, you can find the roots of so much dis-ease within the body. It doesn't have to be actually labeled, diagnosed, big external world diseases that you placed upon yourself. It could just be the dis-ease within a healthy body that happens all the time. So you'll find value in speaking with each boss, no matter if you're feeling sick and tired or you're feeling energized and healthy. There's input values and lessons and workings to be done, no matter what your space is at right now. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I went over the time a little bit, but I feel like I stayed direct to what I wanted to talk about within the concepts, the layers, and the lenses. Like I said, if you're looking for more, I do have that long form lecture video, which I'll have in the descriptions if you want to watch that. In the meantime, I will be back probably next week with these videos where we'll dive right into each one of those consciousness separately and see what we can find and how to dissect those as systems as a whole next time. So I hope you will check my channel back out later in the week to come for those. And in the meantime, you can always find my content on YouTube or BitChute, on Spotify, on Telegram, or directly on my website, amariespeaks.com. I have a plethora of free resources, tips, and tools over there for all things introspection, spirituality, and happiness. Also do readings and that type of thing if you're interested in spiritual divination or spiritual advisory or anything like that. You can find all my contact information on my website. So thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. I appreciate your contribution to our collective, and thank you so much for witnessing mine. I will talk to you next time.